Good morning, HOD, all chiefs, colleagues, and postgraduates. Today's topic of discussion is avascular necrosis of femoral head. As you know, this is the most hotspot topic in clinical exams, where most of the chiefs discuss in detail about the avian of femur head. This lecture will give you theoretical points on definition, blood supply, etiology, pathology, and classification. To, to start with, what are the various synonyms or the alternative names? It is called as osteonecrosis, ischemic necrosis, bone necrosis, aseptic necrosis, or a bone infarction. Then what could be the terminology which can be used? Initially in 1948, avian was first recognized as coronary artery disease of the hip. Later, the concept came as aseptic necrosis, which often was turned to avascular necrosis or ischemic necrosis. Currently, osteonecrosis is the better term of choice because this describes the main feature of the condition, which is bone death. Definition. As such, it is not a disease to be defined, but it is a condition in which a circumscribed area of bone becomes necrotic as a result of loss of its blood supply, which leads to death of osteocytes with subsequent structural changes. Coming to the historical review, it was in 1888 Honing first described this condition as osteochondritis dissecans of femoral head. In 1925, Anish described the index case of idiopathic ischemic necrosis. The theory of arterial occlusion was posted as the etiology in 1950, but the spot highlight came when Pietro Grande in 1957 identified the first case of avian following steroid therapy. The major thing with avascular necrosis of femoral head is the blood supply of the head of the femur, which is unique. The blood supply of the head of femur is major supply will be from the medial epiphyseal arteries and the lateral epiphyseal arteries, which are arranged as two rings. One is the extracapsular arterial ring, which is placed at the base of the femoral neck outside the fibrous capsule. Contributing factors will be the anteriorly will be lateral circumflex femoral artery, and posteriorly will be the medial circumflex femoral artery with minor contributions from superior and inferior gluteal arteries, which in turn gives rise to ascending cervical arteries, which form a subsynovial or intra-articular ring at the junction between the head and neck. And there is a supply also from the artery of ligamentum teres, which increases in size with age, which is a division of branch of posterior division of obturator artery. What are the anatomical risk factors for femoral head to be predisposed to be avian? It will be the subchondral part of the bone lies at a distance from the main vascular territory. That is a major cause. And subchondral typically are supplied by end arterioles. And the vascular sinusoids of the marrow don't have any adventitious layer, so easily compressed by marrow edema. This is the reason why the avascular necrosis is more common in the femoral head. Coming to the etiology, this is a major tabular column which is important because while taking history, if you ask all these things, it will be easy for you to correlate with your diagnosis with avascular necrosis. The first thing will be the trauma, where femoral neck fracture and dislocation is the major cause. And the second thing will be corticosteroids, then alcohol. You should ask for coagulation disorders like thrombophilia, hypofibrinolysis, systemic SLE and connective tissue diseases, hyperlipidemias. Always look for sickle cell anemia, thalassemia. Ask for histories regarding renal, cardiac, and liver transplant. Dysbarism. Look for liver dysfunction, gastrointestinal disorders. Ask for leukemia, history of Gaucher's, and any history of radiation, pregnancy, smoking, hyperuricemia, chemotherapeutic agents, hypersensitive reaction, and then idiopathy. All these are probably etiological factors for avian. We'll see in detail each and everything. Since it is most of the things are asked in the clinical exams. Related to trauma, it will be the dislocation of hip and fracture neck of femur. Mechanism being the direct damage to the blood vessel and due to kinking or clotting or a high pressure tamponade effect. Incidence is more common with femoral neck fractures, with displaced fractures accounting to 20% of AVN, and in hip dislocations it is around 15%. What are the association of AVN and steroids? The pathogenesis of hypercortisolism is still unknown, but most probable factors being discussed are fat embolism from the liver, which is a predisposing factor, and corticosteroids association with insulin resistance, hypertension, arteriosclerosis, which in fact made them call as a coronary artery disease of the hip. Corticosteroids, as you know, causes osteoporosis, which in turn lead to microfractures and AVN. It is the peak doses of steroid which is significant rather than the duration of treatment. 20 milligram per day increases the risk. Relative risk goes up by 4 to 6 fold for every 10 milligram per day increase. Sorry. Stop. I am continuing with this. Association with renal failure, history of congenital anomalies and acquired renal disease should be asked for. And then association with collagen vascular diseases like scleroderma, SLE, and dermatomyositis, which they usually cause thickening and necrosis of the basement membrane of the vessels, which can cause occlusion of the vessels. Also, corticosteroids used in the treatment of this can contribute to AVN. What is the risk of AVN with alcohol? It is a definitive risk factor with chronic alcoholism, being fat emboli that originates from the associated fatty liver. It is postulated that greater than 400 ml per day of spirit increases the risk by 9-fold. And sickle cell anemia and thalassemia usually cause sluggish blood flow, which results in diminished blood supply, leading to avascular necrosis. With regards to radiation, it will be the direct cell damage due to the cells in the walls of the blood vessels, causing obliteration. Risk is very high in Hodgkin's and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma patients receiving radiotherapy, chemotherapy, and steroids. Dysbaric AVN, it occurs in air workers and divers. Usually the period between exposure and radiological changes is usually 4 to 12 months, which is longer than usual idiopathic AVN. With Gaucher's disease, there is accommodation of the glucose precursors in the reticuloendothelial system, which may direct cause affection on the femoral head. Also, it affects the liver disease, producing fat embolism, which in turn leads to AVN. The major thing will be the vicious cycle in this arterial occlusion, which can be predisposed by sickle cell anemia, dysbaric ischemia, thrombocytopenia, fat embolism, which in turn leads to marrow edema, which causes sinusoidal compression. Sinusoidal compression as a factor may come from Gaucher's, tuberculosis, corticosteroid use, alcohol, and dysbarism, which in turn leads to vascular stasis, and the cycle continues, leading to arterial occlusion. Idiopathic AVN. This is just a diagnosis of exclusion, but it constitutes the major 25% of cases which we see. The thrombosis of vessels supplying femoral head is due to the etiology is not known. After going through the etiology, then will be the pathophysiology. How you get the avascular necrosis due to the various etiological factors. It will be the direct cellular toxicity, which is produced by the chemotherapeutic agents, radiation, thermal injury caused by the alcohol, corticosteroids. The causes can be extra-osseous arterial causes like femoral neck fracture, hip dislocation, and the extra-osseous venous causes like venous abnormalities, stasis, intra-osseous intravascular causes like sickle cell anemia, dysbarism, embolies, intra-osseous extravascular causes where there will be a hemorrhage, displaced femur neck fracture, and multifactorial, which is usually the coordination of all these things, which could be the reason for the development of AVN. Then to the pathogenesis. Pathogenesis in AVN can be described in 4 different phases. First is a avascular phase, in which the infarction typically takes place in the fatty marrow. The subchondral bone becomes necrotic. As a result, the overlying cartilage hypertrophies. The second stage will be the attempt to clean up the area with the osteoclastic and osteoblastic activity. As a result, cell death occurs, results in fragmentation and collapse of the overlying cortex. The first indication of collapse is the crescent sign. Further collapse may result to step sign. Usually, it will be followed by diffuse sclerosis of femoral head if the repair is sufficient, which we call it as a snow cap sign. Stage 3 is the typical repair phase. The repair is dependent on the degree of blood loss and cell death in the initial insult. And also the patient's immune system and healing response also play a vital role in repair phase. Stage 4 is a deformity phase. As is told in repair phase, it will be dependent on the initial severity of the insult, and it usually results in early or a severe degenerative joint disease. What is the repair? What is the sequence of repair? That is the thing usually asked. Usually in the first phase, there will be a loss of cell viability which occurs in less than 24 hours. In 2 to 4 days, there will be cell changes like pyknosis and karyolysis. Phase 2 will be invasion of marrow cells with spaces by capillaries, primitive mesenchymal cells and inflammatory cells. Phase 3, where invasion of capillaries and cells occurs in the dead bone. Phase 4 will be the synthesis of new bone. Mesenchymal cells differentiate to osteoblasts. And as with other bone healing, it will be like phase 5 will be early internal remodeling, and phase 6 will be late internal remodeling, with phase 7 causing resorption of subchondral bone, and phase 8 depending on the initial leading to osteoarthritic changes. This is a gradual repair phase involved in the pathophysiology. Then the most common questions: what are the 4 zones in the AVN in a histopathology? The first zone will be A, will be the zone of cell death, and the B will zone of ischemic injury. Then reactive hyperemia will be C, and D will be the normal tissue. Necrosis usually occurs in the anterosupralateral part, which is the weight-bearing portion, which is the reason leading out to increased vascularized cellular tissue, which in turn lead to necrotic trabecular, and there is an increased cortical density. And then the common question: what is crescent sign? As in histopathology, the fracture occurs at the junction between the repaired and unrepaired part of the necrotic segment. The interval created by the fracture is filled with fibrocartilaginous tissue. It is visible as a radiolucent sign in X-ray, which is called as the crescent sign. Having discussed the etiology, pathophysiology, then comes the classification system. They are given a various classification system, as with radiologically by Pickett-Arlett, quantification of damage by Sternberg, stage of osteonecrosis by Jennings, and extent and location of lesion by Kerbel, Japanese criteria of location, Sugiyokyo's radiological classification, University of Pennsylvania system, and the latest developed ARCO system. Usually, the thing we are usually use Pickett-Arlett classification, and we can update with ARCO classification. That is my suggestion. But whatever the classification system is, it should guide you to the proper treatment depending on your stage which you opt for. Pickett and Arlett, it was in 1960, Pickett and Arlett in France, around in 1964, it was avian classification. They came with a 3-part staging system. In 1970, they added the 4th stage. Later stages of stage 0 and transitional stage were added. Major bone and marrow scans are mentioned, but they did not appear in an integral part of the system. They were used, but they are not made as an important thing in the mandatory to take it in the classification. MRI was not described during Pickett-Arlett time. Usually it was invasive tests such as intraosseous pressure measurements, femoral biopsy, which are deemed to make diagnosis in the earlier stage. But Pickett-Arlett, the drawback is there was no attempt to measure the quantification of the involvement, which could have given the idea on prognosis. This is the modified Pickett-Arlett classification. The stage 1, where there is a radiologically it is normal and the bone scan shows a decreased uptake. It is usually a silent hip, where the opposite side of the affected hip will be usually in the stage 0, and then stage 1, where the radiographic changes might be normal, but bone scan shows changes with osteoporosis, which will be the most common thing. Uh, Pathologically, it is seen as an infarction of the weight-bearing portion, and biopsy may show dead cells and osteoblasts and osteogenic cells. Stage 2, there will be a density change in the femoral head with increased uptake in bone scan. There will be spontaneous repair of the impacted area and the new bone deposited between trabeculae in biopsy. Stage 2 is further divided into 2A and 2B. In 2A, it will be mostly sclerosis or cyst with the normal joint line and head contour, with the bone scan showing an increased uptake, and stage 2B being the flattening or the crescent sign. Stage 3, there is loss of sphericity of the head with collapse and distortion of the bone outline, but the joint space is normal. There is a subchondral collapse as seen in the bone scan, and also in the biopsy reveals a dead bone trabeculae. Stage 4 is this moderate to severe thing where there is a joint space narrowing and acetabular changes. Bone scan showing an increased uptake. Osteoarthritic changes are seen in bone biopsy. After stage 2B, use of bone scan will be very limited. But before 2A, a bone scan plays an important role in identifying the stage of the lesion. Cruz made an alteration in the Pickett-Allen classification where he added the sequential stages with 1 to 5. 2A and 2B were given as 2B and 2-3, stage 3. Then came the Glimmacher and Genzora classification, which was similar to the Pickett-Allen classification. Takatori classification is an MRI-based classification. This was useful as it was able to get the portion of the weight-bearing area of the femoral head, which was going to be involved, and it helped to give a prognosis because the site of the involvement can be made out in the MRI. University of Pennsylvania system, around 20% of the people use this system. This is very much similar to the ARCO classification, which I am going to describe next. Though the percentage of ARCO classification used is only around 12% as of date, but this is universally accepted and it is starting to be the thing which everybody is using as of now. In stage 0, all present techniques normal or non-diagnostic. There will not be any finding which we can make out in X-ray, CT, scintigraphy. Usually, we think this could be a silent hip or the opposite hip of the affected hip, opposite side of the affected hip. The stage 1, there are X-ray and CT appears to be normal. Usually, the scintigraphy picks it out. And stage 2, X-ray shows abnormalities like sclerosis, osteolysis, and focal porosis, but there is no crescent sign. Both CT and MRI can be used to identify the location and quantitate the involvement. Stage 3 is typical crescent sign, where CT and other investigations are added to quantitate the damage, which can be given as a subclassification depending on the location. It could be medial, central, or lateral, which could help in the prognosis, and quantification of the amount of involvement. Based on the percentage of area involvement, like minimal less than 15%, moderate 15 to 30%, and severe more than 30%. Also, the length of the crescent were used to quantify less than 15%, 15 to 30%, and more than 30%. Surface collapse of the acetabular head, of the femoral head was also used, where it is less than 2 mm collapse, or 2 to 4 mm collapse, or more than 4 mm collapse. Was there in stage 4, where flattening and collapse of femoral head was seen, and loss of joint space was staged as stage 5, and stage 6 marked destruction of the articular surface on the acetabular side also, resulting in degenerative joint disease. Shimizu classification is another thing which was based on MRI classification. It not only focused on the extent given by the MRI, but it also took into account of the location of the weight-bearing portion. So this can have a better impact on giving the prognosis when given the stage of the thing. In grade 1, there was less than 1/4 of femoral head involvement with less than 1/3 of weight-bearing, rarely goes in for collapse. In grade 2, where there is about half femoral head involvement with 1/3 to 2/3 of weight-bearing usually affected, the collapse is expected to be around 30%. If the femoral head involvement is even less than around 1/4, and if the weight-bearing portion is going to be involved, greater than 2/3 of anterosuprolateral bud. The collapse which is expected is 70% collapse in 3 years. So there might be so many classification systems, usually fit into Pickett-Allen, modified Pickett-Allen, and if needed, update to ARCO. And then comes the how to radiologically say the signs and how to read the X-ray in a avian patient. The radiological sequential changes in the radiology will be first will be the crescent sign, which will be followed by the osteoporosis, sclerosis, cystic changes with loss of spherical weight-bearing dome, partial collapse of M, and secondary arthritis. As seen in this first image will be the crescent sign with osteoporosis. Third one will be sclerosis. Third one, then cyst in the fourth image, with fifth is showing loss of femoral head contour and severe degenerative disease in the sixth image. The MRI findings as sequential will be first initially will be a bone marrow edema, and then there will be a double line sign which we call it as a head in head sign, and then the crescent sign followed by collapse, joint effusion, involvement of the acetabulum, and after that another things can be studied in MRI, which is the status of the other hip. What is may not be visible in an X-ray, status of the other hip, and also the marrow infiltrating disease can be picked out in an MRI. This is a T1 image showing the signal intensity. Important thing will be the double line sign. The double line sign, the major reason for the double line sign initially will be the hypervascular tissue in the repair phase, which will be visible as a head in head sign. Then what are the functional investigations which can be used? Functional investigations means the direct intraosseous pressure management, where the normal pressure will be baseline will be 30 mm. If it is given a stress test, there is a transient mild pressure elevation with IV intravenous venogram. Contrast is usually cleared within 5 minutes. But in osteonecrosis of femoral lead, there will be a greater than 30 mm of baseline. Stress test, there will be a greater than 10 mm increase for every 5 minutes. And intravenous, there will be a stasis. Intravenous venography, intravenous pressure measurements, histological examination of core biopsy specimens were very important prior to the development of radiographic changes. Seldom these days it is indicated as MRI is available, but histological evaluation plays a useful role in distinguishing osteonecrosis from TOH, which is transient osteoporosis of hip. In serology, we should also rule out risk factors like sickle cell disease, SLE, hyperuricemia, abnormal amounts of circulating lipids, and subtle coagulopathies. Standard measurements like prothrombin time, partial prothrombin time, bleeding time should be taken into account, and complete coagulation profile to rule out thrombophilia, protein C, protein S, and antithrombin 3, and increased resistance like a RAPC, antiphospholipid antibodies, and look into hypofibrinolysis. Other imaging modalities like CT can usefully be quantitating the extent of the femoral lead, which might help in the prognosis. Technetium scan might be useful where MRI picture is atypical, and that needs a confirmation of the diagnosis. There are limited studies regarding the single photon emission photography, which is SPECT and PET and gadolinium enhanced MRI as of now in avian. The major differential will be the histologically, etiologically, pathologically will be the transient osteoporosis of the hip, which is primarily due to marrow edema. Onset of pain will be usually more severe in this, which will be more sudden. Men will be more common affected than women. There is no associated risk factors as in osteoporosis. In women, usually it occurs in the third trimester of the pregnancy. Incidence of fracture is greater than in women. But in this, there is no findings of bone infarction or repair, which are the hallmarks of osteonecrosis. It involves both the femoral head and neck, which can be seen both in T1 and T2 weighted images, as there is bone marrow edema in both T1 and T2 weighted images. Thank you. These are my references. Sir, vast topic, sir. Any questions you can ask? Sir? Sir, off on it, sir. And first thing, one thing which is commonly asked in exam is how you differentiate between a picket alert. What is modification in the picket alert? That is the thing usually asked in exams. Initially, picket alert, the image which I gave was modified picket alert. The initial picket alert classification is only four stages. Uh, Initial picket alert classification was only radiological. Modification, as we can thought that there are some other features which can be used in the prognosis. He added bone, which the bone scan was at that time intra and other patient measurements was staged. That's resulted in additional stage of stage 0. In initial modified picket alert, 0 stage 1 or initial stage of stage 1 in picket alert, stage 2A, stage 2. In stage 3, present sign, initial picket alert. In stage 4, original picket alert. After 19, MR were added picket alert and various classifications comes, but we modified picket scan. Thanks.